Hello everyone, my name is Eric. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'll finish up here, and then I think we have a break after I'm done, so we'll get your legs moving again here in just a moment. I live in Missoula right now. I've been there for about 6 years. I raised 4 kids up in Great Falls for 20 years. I don't miss the wind in Great Falls, but I do miss Great Falls. And have 2 grandkids who live in St. Louis now. And I've been in Montana for over 25 years. I love this state. I like to backpack in this state. I play guitar. I like to enjoy the state as much as anyone. And for the last 15 years or so, I was a tax preparer and a tax auditor. That's what I did for a profession. About 3 years ago, I heard about this concept called ranked choice voting, and I said, that sounds like it would work. That sounds important. And I started volunteering to change our system, like Frank is doing over here, and then the Montana support grew. And so about a year ago, I started doing this full time, and I'm the executive director of an organization that continues to work on this topic of ranked choice voting and voting reform. When I started 3 years ago, I just said, that ranked choice voting sounds like a good idea. And so let's call it Ranked Choice Voting Montana, right? It wasn't until I started the organization that I heard about nonpartisan open primaries. Okay, I need to think about that. Is that something that's good for Montana? Is that something that I agree with? And have discussions with our supporters and volunteers. Have you heard of open primaries? Do you think this is a good thing? So, in a sense, I've gone through this process that maybe you're going through right now. What is nonpartisan open primaries? Do we want a majority winner? And what is Eric going to talk about, this ranked choice voting thing, right? And is it good? And you're going to hear me say a lot of the same things that Frank said, because when we're looking at our elections, we want the same solutions, right? We want less mudslinging. We want less partisanship. We want to feel like our vote counts. We want to be able to have conversations with our neighbors and not feel so polarized. We want to avoid spoiler votes and wasted votes. Right now, some people go out and vote and feel like my vote doesn't count. I can't really vote my conscience because of the current system. And so the solutions that we're looking for are the same. And what I'm going to talk about is not on the ballot. We're not gathering signatures this year. It will not be on the ballot in November, but it's a piece of the puzzle that I think keep on top of your mind and may fit in with what Frank is up to. Before I talk about ranked choice voting, I want you to just think a little bit about, oftentimes when we're thinking about our elections, we're asking ourselves the question, will my party win? Will this elect the opposing party? If yes, I don't want this, right? Or if it elects my party, then great. We want to think beyond that, right? I urge you and to urge your neighbors to think more broadly. What are the issues that you care about? Think about just for a minute right now. What are the issues and ideas that you care about? Put the party label away for a minute and say, I care about X, I care about Y, I care about Z. The neighbor down the street or that shares a fence with you, what are their values? What are their principles? Put the party label aside. They care about F. Do they care about M and S? Right? And if we look at things that way, what we actually find is what the news and social media is feeding to us, we are not as polarized as we think. we have much more in common in our values and our principles and what we want than what we're being fed to us, okay? And I think if anybody in the state, it's Sanders County that understands that. You live with neighbors who feel differently than you, who vote for a different party than you, but you actually probably share campfires and go to the fair with them and have neighborly conversations with them, and you show up and you help them move, and you help them haul their hay, and you help them calve, right? And that's how we want our politics to work, and that's exactly how the solutions that Frank is seeking. And so tomorrow is the Iowa caucus, okay? So in Iowa, they're gonna come into a room like this, and they're gonna stand in different corners of the room and say, this is the candidate I support. And similar to what we have now, whoever has 25% of the vote, 26% of the vote could win, right? But if you sit in that room, imagine you're sitting in this room and you're all in 4 different corners and you're looking at your neighbors, and that person with 26% wins, and 75% of you are looking at the rest of the room, right? You have 75%, 74% saying, I'm really unrepresented, right? But there's one thing that Iowa has going for them in the caucus, is that you're looking your neighbors in the eye, and you could look and say, well, the candidate that they're standing over there for, I agree with 80% of the time. Or this group over here, I agree with that candidate 70% of the time. You know, and if you had the opportunity to walk from one corner to the other corner and maybe build the support for another candidate, that would be a great opportunity, right? So the idea is just that we can talk about what we agree on. Look at the issues, look at the candidates and say, this is my first choice candidate. This is my second choice candidate. This is my least favorite candidate, right? And to be able to express how much we disagree with a candidate, not just yes or no, not just expressing our opinion on one candidate. And just to show that this is not as far away as we think it is, they've polled Americans, and a lot of the things that they tell us that parties are divided on, Americans are not divided on, and Montanans are not divided on. Okay, over 60% of Americans have a favorable view of free enterprise or capitalism. Okay, over 70% think that those who have felonies should be able to vote. Over 71% are okay with same-sex marriage. 64% say that community college should be free. 78% we should have a voter ID. 77% that there's too much, we need money limits in our campaigns, right? 73% say firearms should not be banned. And 92% say we should have background checks. Okay, so these are some of the polarized examples that we often feel like we're divided on, but we're actually not, okay? So if we could take those issues and move them off the table, because now we have a government that's working, and say, you know what, we agree on these issues. Now let's get back to talking about energy and education and some of the other good issues.
Like workforce training and...
Imagine that. So, you guys know this well in Sanders County. The polling in America matches what your experience is here in the county. And so Frank talked about how 40% of Montana considers themselves independent. Could that be the reason that we have a growing swell of independents? Because they look at these numbers, they have conversations with their neighbors and say, me and my neighbors aren't divided on this issue. And how I feel is not represented in this party or that party. And as independents grow, current system blocks them out. You have to pick a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. So again, before I talk about ranked choice voting, I want to talk about one other system. Frank talked about how we're going to have the top 4 move on in open primaries, that's the initiative. A system that exists now, so in California and Washington and Louisiana, they use top 2 open primaries. And you probably read the newspapers in Montana. We don't want what California has. We don't want what Washington has. And because this debate about open primaries has happened in Montana a number of times over the last 15 years. And there have been articles saying we don't want these open primaries. Because what happens in California? 2 Democrats end up on the ballot and 0 Republicans. Or in Republican districts, 2 Republicans show up on the ballot and 0 Democrats. How could that be fair? But as Frank has already talked about, when you go to the general, and it's just a red or a blue, the choices don't really change, right? You show up at 2 elections and you vote for your family, right? And nothing really changes. Whoever's got the majority of those colors, that's who wins. But in a district that's already mostly red, now you have 2 reds on the ballot. And to what Frank was talking about, now there's an incentive for those 2 red candidates to go find broad support. That's how they're going to win in the general. Is now those 2 candidates who are aligned in the same party now have to cross party lines to win and represent their constituency. So California's been using this for 15 or so years now, and Unite America just did a study and looked at California and said they are overall, the R's and the D's in the legislature haven't changed much, but how well they're listening to their voters has improved. How extreme the things that they're voting on has changed. They've become less polarized, and they're voting on issues that matter, and they're listening to their voters. Now, that was a slight tweak to the current system, okay? But in a top 2 system, what's the problem? One party runs 5 candidates, the other party runs 2 candidates. The 5 candidates split the vote and elect the other party. Okay? So, overall, top 2 primaries in California has improved politics. That would be an improvement across the nation. But there's still a problem. So let's solve it, right? Let's not do that. Let's improve it. Let's add more choices. Instead of top 2, top 4. Okay? Now we have more choices. And even in a red district, maybe you've got 1 blue and a libertarian that wins. Okay? We actually have some examples in Montana. So back to 2022, not that far away, in House District 1, this is the one that Zinke ended up winning. If we had top 4 open primaries, in that election, there was a red, there was a D, there was a libertarian, okay? But if we had top 4, it would be Monica Trinnell, Ryan Zinke, Al Ozuski, and Cora Newman, okay? Did that improve our choices? Did that improve our representation? In the other district, District 2, that Rosendale won, the top 4 choices that we would have had if it was top 4, we look at all the votes counted: Rosendale, Buchanan, Penny Ronning, and Kyle Austin. Okay? 2 R's, 1 D, 1 libertarian. Back just a little bit farther for 2020 for governor, the Gianforte one. The 4 choices would have been Gianforte, Mike Cooney, Whitney Williams, and Tim Fox. Okay, thinking about those 4, is there more than one of those candidates that you could have gotten behind, regardless of party? Okay. And then just back a few more years, for governor, Gianforte, 2016, Steve Bullock, Terry Nelson, Ted Dunlap was a libertarian. And I'm sorry, early in 2022, Buchanan was independent. So sometimes we end up with the same, red and blue. Sometimes an independent gets thrown in there. Another year, a libertarian makes it into the top 4. We go into the general. Now, the question is, what do we do with those 4? Okay. The other initiative that is on the ballot this year is to win by a majority, and leave it to the legislature how we determine that majority. How do we take these 4 and find out who has the majority support? As Frank mentioned, there's a couple of options. There's traditional runoffs, like Georgia uses, Texas. A lot of these southern states that have traditional runoffs, if there is not a majority winner. And as you know, when there is not a majority winner in the November election, they have a separate election in January, February, with the top 2 to determine who, to get a majority. I don't want to come back for an election in January. And Georgia has found that to be true as well, where 500,000 to 700,000 voters don't come back in January. Okay, so I don't think that's a viable solution. However, just like I explained in California, it would be better than what we have now. If we get nonpartisan top 4 open primaries, plus a majority winner mandate, and the legislature chooses a runoff to come back in January, it is better than what we have now. We have to change the system. We have to improve the conversations with our neighbors. We have to be able to talk about issues and reach consensus. But there's an instant way we can do this. And guess what? Georgia's already doing this. They send out a ballot to their military and their overseas citizens that says, what's your first choice? What's your second choice? What's your third choice? What's your 4th choice? Because of the mail delay for military and overseas citizens, and they have runoff elections, they want to know, what's your backup choice? So 10 states use traditional runoffs. 7 out of the 10 states send a ranked ballot to their military and overseas. They have the system already in place to solve this problem, yet they still hold elections in January. Okay, so you also see in the news that some of these states are pursuing, let's make this better, faster, and cheaper. Let's get rid of the January election, and let's have one ballot where we put our choices of preference. Okay. So the whole goal of ranked choice voting is to determine the majority winner, right? If a candidate wins with a majority, the election is over just like it is now, okay? You put your first choice, you count them up, candidate wins with a majority, nothing changes. But when the candidates do not get a majority, that's when we go into the rankings and the process of elimination. Who is the least preferred candidate? Eliminate them and look on their ballot and see who their second choice is. And add their second choices to the remaining candidates. If after that first elimination round we have a majority, then the winner is declared, no more elimination. If we don't, we eliminate third place. Who is the least preferred candidate? Add their next choice to the tally, and at that point we would find a majority, because there's 2 candidates left. But it's simply a process of elimination. We do it with ice cream, we do it with pizza, we do it with what college we want to attend, or any number of things. We do it as humans, it's not complicated. And that's one of the main oppositions that you'll read about in the news is this is too complicated, but we do it every day. Where else is this being used? We have over 50 jurisdictions in the United States that currently use it. There are a number of places around the world that use it. Europe and Australia and Canada have been using this for over 100 years. But in the United States, it's relatively new. There have been some jurisdictions over the last 100 years that have used it in the United States, but currently, as of today, we have over 50 jurisdictions using it in the United States. 2 states that use it statewide, Alaska, that Frank mentioned, and Maine was the first state to use ranked choice voting statewide. Alaska uses a top 4 open primary to determine the final 4. Maine still has partisan primaries, but they use ranked choice voting within their party. So they find their nominee within the party who goes on to the general still with ranked choice voting. But I did hear that they're recently looking at opening up the primaries and making it nonpartisan. So that may change. But still, what they're doing now is better because the nominee who ends up winning has more support, has majority support. You'll also see this year, there are 2 states that will have it on the ballot. Open primaries plus ranked choice voting. Oregon will be voting on it. It'll be on the ballot, and Nevada, it will be on the ballot. And they are voting on what Alaska has, essentially. Top 4 or 5 open primary, and Oregon is a top 4 ranked choice voting. And then there are some other neighboring states that are doing what they're pursuing versions of this, gathering signatures to get it on the ballot. Arizona is pursuing it. Idaho is pursuing it. Colorado is pursuing it. And South Dakota is pursuing open primaries only. But we have neighbors around us who are going to be pursuing this, and we have use case scenarios already in our state. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is a learning process, right? And when I first got involved with this 3 years ago, I had things that I needed to learn. And when Montanans for Election Reform first announced their reforms of open primaries plus majority winner, I asked myself, where's the ranked choice voting, right? But what I realized, look at our current Montana Constitution. The current Montana Constitution gives the legislature the authority to administer the elections, okay? And so it's the Montana way that we do things as a people and we involve the legislature. We still have in Montana legislators who call us back, who answer their emails, who come to town halls. And so we have what I think is a unique and awesome opportunity to involve the legislature in this process. There's a lot that feels destabilizing right now. Even in Montana, the world is moving fast. And if the legislature is going to have conversations about artificial intelligence, if we're having conversations about agriculture and our economy and education and what this world looks like, we need a government that is responsive. We need a government that we continue to work together. If the legislature feels railroaded by the people, if the people feel railroaded by the legislature, that's not a functioning government. But with nonpartisan open primaries, with a majority winner, with ranked choice voting, again, under the hood, systems that help us feel less polarized, reduce the mudslinging, incentivize candidates to campaign at a door they normally wouldn't campaign at. Also empowering candidates to run. Right now, we have some candidates who will stay out of the race out of respect for another candidate and say, I don't want to split votes from them. We want a system that encourages candidates to run and just give us choices. So I've actually had conversations with Alaskans, and there are people up in Alaska who are opposing ranked choice voting. and there's pushback and there's opposition, but 85% of Alaskans like ranked choice voting and open primaries. But what they have said is, you know what, we might have had less pushback if you're doing what you're doing in Montana, where there's a piece that the people say, these are principles that we value. We value nonpartisan open primaries. We value a majority winner. These are worthy of enshrining in the Constitution. The administrative piece, the method, how we count it, we don't need to put in the Constitution. We can, in the current Constitution, leave that administrative decision to the legislature. And we can go to the legislature in 2025 and say, you have a choice. And that choice could be instant runoffs, that choice could be traditional runoffs. But people in Alaska feel like there could be less pushbacks if the legislature had been involved initially. I don't think that Alaska is going to repeal it. Like I said, 85% of Alaskans like using it, and they're going to continue voting on it. There's a bipartisan coalition that is formed in Alaska, and so the legislature is getting things done, and they like it. But we can always seek to improve things, right? And Arizona will probably be pursuing it the same way, where they do open primaries plus majority winner, and then leave the decision-making the administrative process to the Arizona legislature. So we're not alone in this, and we have to do what's right for Montana. And again, ranked choice voting is not on the ballot in 2024, but consider these principles. Does what is on the ballot in 2024, does it give you more choice? Do you feel like you have more choice? Do you feel like you can have more conversations with your neighbors? Do you feel like there's going to be less mudslinging? Do you feel like, and is there a majority winner? Does it improve our elections? And as you talk with your neighbors about it, talk about it as neighbors. I support this reform because it helps improve my conversations with you as a neighbor. I support these reforms because there's less mudslinging between you and me and the rest of our neighbors. I support these reforms because I'll have more choices. I'll have more candidates to choose from. And that helps us find more of what we have in common. And the other thing is to say to your neighbor, your voice matters. If you have a libertarian neighbor, and right now they just feel like their voice doesn't matter. They know the math doesn't work. Libertarians know that, okay? But they feel like to make their vote count, they're gonna vote their principles. And for other libertarians, they might vote Republican or Democrat. That's how they feel like their vote counts. But one thing's for certain is the current system says your voice doesn't matter, and it's squashed. But by making tweaks to our system, you tell your libertarian neighbor, I'd like to hear what issues we do agree on. Your voice matters. If you're a Democrat, you tell your Republican neighbor, your voice matters. If you're a Republican, you tell, and vice versa. And so these are some of the ways that I encourage you to have these conversations. We can get lost in the numbers. We can get lost about whether our party wins or not. And we can easily get sucked down the rabbit hole of polarization that is being fed to us around us. But shake hands, talk to your Montana neighbors, and consider reforms like this. We have a website that talks about these reforms. It's called Ranked Choice Voting Montana. We have commentary about these initiatives that are in Montana now, and also talk about the piece of ranked choice voting and how it could fit into the puzzle. I appreciate you having me today, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet you guys again. Some of you I've met in the past, and thanks for coming out in the cold and sharing your time with us.